Good afternoon. My name is Mariana Buquerque. I am a senior fellow here at CEBRI, the Brazilian Center for International Relations, and also a professor of international relations at the Federal University of Rio de Janeiro. And it is with great pleasure that I welcome you all today for the book launch of the book Latin America, the Vision of its Leaders. We have today the incredible opportunity to hear from the book author and organizer, Professor André Rueles, who is the Vice President of the Colombian Council on International Relations. He will share with us some of the process of the creation of the book, some of the main themes, and it is a very comprehensive book. I have here with us, the cover is amazing, but the content is even more. He managed to interview and get contributions from former ministers of foreign relations, former presidents, ambassadors, business leaders, and also members from international organizations. So it is a very good framework for what our region is currently doing and what are the prospects for the future as well. So I'm very happy to have you here, Andres. I will go to the first name basis if that's okay. And it's a pleasure also to strengthen our ties with CORI, the Colombian Council on International Relations. After, I will pass the floor to Andres in a few minutes, but we have also very incredible commentators with us today to also share their thoughts on the future of the region and what are the role of the leaders in Latin America right now. Here we have Professor Thalita Tanchait, who is a professor of the Social Science Department at the Catholic University of Rio de Janeiro, PUC. We have also with us online Gianpiero Leoncini, who is the Executive Vice President of the Development Bank of Latin America and the Caribbean, CAF. So welcome. We're very happy to have you here with us today. And in a few moments, we will be also joined by Lourdes Casanova, who is the director and also a lecturer at the Cornell University, who will also share her thoughts with us today. So with no further ado, I will pass the floor to Andres and extend my thank you to you and to CORI once more. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mariana, and good afternoon to everyone. And thank you, Thalita, and also to Gianpiero Leoncini, the Executive Vice President of CAF, who is online, and also Lourdes Casanova, the Director of Emerging Markets at Cornell University. First of all, I would like to thank CEBRI for the invitation to present my book, Latin America, the Vision of its Leaders. And I congratulate you for taking this initiative to generate this space of reflection in an academic environment on the future challenges of Latin America. And I'm convinced that these exercises need to be carried out on a recurring basis and also in a plural, comprehensive, and very balanced spirit. What lies ahead in the coming years for the region and decades is no small thing. This is what mega trends indicate, and it's a topic that is in the book. We must be prepared to face the challenges of the region and to overcome them successfully. And I believe that only to the extent that we have the diagnosis and particularly the answers to an increasing uncertain future, we will be able to build the right paths from public policy as well as to construct a more prosperous and democratic and inclusive societies in the region. Strong institutions are needed to contribute to economic development and prosperity. And precisely last year, the Nobel Prize in Economics was awarded to 3 social scientists, Acemoglu, Johnson, and Robinson for their pioneer studies in understanding the relationship between political and economic structures and long-term growth, providing a solid basis for development policies. For this reason, the region cannot fall prey of populists who seek to weaken institutions and change the rules of the game in the midway. Dear colleagues, the starting point for this book was an ever-present question: where is heading Latin America? The result is reflected in 30 interviews with leaders of the region that are part of this book, in the 55 articles written especially for this volume by leading authorities, experts, and academics, and in the 1992 pages written at the University of Oxford and the London School of Economics. So I believe that you can read this during the weekend, no?
Easy reading.
Yeah. Well, a total of 106 personalities participated. From Brazil, I will highlight Celso Amorim and President Golfan of the Inter-American Development Bank, among others, whose contributions reflect intellectual depth, geographical diversity, political and ideological plurality, gender balance, and generational equilibrium. And I think those were the principles that apply for the selection of the people that participated in the book. And also the book revolves around 6 thematic axes, which in my opinion are the main challenges of the region, which are poverty and inequality, growth and productivity, environment, democracy, regional integration, and international affairs or international insertion of the region. These axes or these challenges reveal pending tasks, aspirations, and key fronts in the work for the future of the region. Also, they reflect potential risk in the journey through history. And I say in the book that, like the cogs in a wheel, these are elements that drive each other, and we have to understand them in their uniqueness to be able to successfully address the challenges in 3 dimensions: national, regional, and global. So those are the 3 dimensions of the book. And let me tell you a story that when I was interviewing President Lagos, former President Lagos for Chile, one of the things that he highlighted immediately when I did the interview, he said, I haven't seen this approach in which you take the core 6 axes at the 3 levels. So this is something that's unique in the literature. And this work is intended to be a collective contribution, a sort of global and regional public good, to think about Latin America in the present and in the future, and finding answers to its main challenges. And also, by the way, I would like to underline that all the royalties of the book were donated to a foundation in Colombia that works for the girls and boys in a situation of vulnerability. So that it has also a social commitment, the book. The question of the future and the successful participation of countries and regions in the world is also being asked in other parts of the planet, especially in the global south. And here's an example. I believe India is a very good example, that India is directing its efforts towards building its own way. They call it the Indian way, which prioritizes intensive investment in human capital, the provision of high-skilled services, and innovation in new manufacturing products. So the future of India is based on knowledge and creativity. Goldman Sachs projections point to India being the 2nd largest economy after China by 2075. And in this context, I do believe that Latin America must also pave its own path we have to build our own Latin American way. And that's a very strong message that is in the book. Nevertheless, we find ourselves currently immersed in a global scenario that resembles an endless hurricane with incommensurable speeds. Uncertainty seems to be the new normal. Former British Minister Gordon Brown has summed it up in one word: perma-crisis, understood as an extended period of instability and insecurity resulting from a series of catastrophic events. A few days ago, I published an opinion article in Foreign Affairs Latin America under the title, "The Geopolitics of Uncertainty." In this article, I point out that geopolitics has returned with impetus to the international chessboard, especially with the arrival of a new government in Washington and its interest in recovering leadership and power. The new competition will inevitably lead to a defense of national interests over international ones on critical issues such as trade, health, and environment. So in other words, the biggest economies are closing at this moment. And that's something to watch, and also will have implications on regional integration for Latin America, but we can discuss that later. So as a humanity, we are in a profound process of epochal change, which is a turning point. This convulsion of this change of the world is not random, neither is fragility, fragmentation, and polarization. In the book, we say that we live among tectonic plates that move simultaneously and in different directions. In this regard, identify at least 6 trends that I will highlight. The first one is that we have new geopolitics and economics. The second one is that democracies are becoming more fragile. The third one is we have a triple global crisis on food, and financial. The fourth one is the projections of the economic growth at the global scenario are very weak. The fifth one is that we have the climate change and water challenges. And just to mention that today, more than 3,000 million people lack of access to water. And the sixth one is that we have weapons of mass destruction combined with the use of technologies, or new technologies, which make them more powerful and with a huge capacity of destruction. So how Latin America arrives to this scenario? And Latin America arrives at this epochal of change in a fragile and in a divided state with different development traps in terms of economic, social, productivity, environment, institutional, and governance issues. The region has lost relative importance in the world, and the quality of its external insertion has been deteriorating. And we have to underline that the relevance of the region in the world is under question mark. Despite all the challenges, I remain on the optimistic side. This feeling brings energy, drive, creativity, and innovation. And Latin America has all the potential to become a region of solutions, given its enormous wealth. It has a role to play and capital to contribute to natural resources, raw materials, climate change, clean energy, and food. Indeed, the Amazon absorbs 1/4 of the planet's CO2. We have 60% of the world's lithium reserves, 50% of the copper reserves. We can feed 1.3 billion people. And by 2050, we can feed around 8 billion people around the world. And we are the most dynamic region after India in terms of venture capital and unicorns. In short, we have what other countries and blocs need and crave to compete effectively in a global, green, and digital economy. So in the book, I underline that the opportunity that Latin America has cannot be wasted. Nevertheless, it requires a renewed leadership. The region has the imperative to build long-term visions. The region have to think big, have to act pragmatically, and to construct broad consensus on the structural reforms needed to ensure a more prosperous and inclusive future. Latin American leaders must take advantage of all the opportunities that are available today. And the work carried out in this book is directed precisely as indicated in each of the titles of the 6 concept notes of the chapters towards a common north. And let me mention in a Twitter way, very shortly, the 6 core messages here. The first one is that we need to seek for a new social contract based on sectoral pacts and an unrestricted adherence to democracy. The second one is that we need to move from ideology to action for the construction of a development model that prioritizes productive transformation under what I call the GDI formula, green, digital, and inclusive way. The third one is that we need to achieve more climate action and stop the rhetoric around environment. There is a lot of rhetoric here, and we need more climate action. The fourth one is that we face the democratic disenchantment that flirts with a dangerous what if, which opens the door to the autocrats 2.0, which is something that I developed in the book. The fifth one is that we need to deepen the possible path for a regional integration with pragmatism and without ideologies. And the sixth one is that we have to face the challenge of building a Latin American way of international insertion in a new world that we have to give a privilege to multilateralisms and strengthen our voice and presence in simultaneous platforms. That's to say, we have to talk with the US, with China, with the European Union, with India, Global South. We have to talk with everyone and to work with everyone, but to keep our autonomy is very important. And let me make here just a final reflection within the framework of this presentation at CEBRI. And the final reflection is that Latin America needs to rethink its growth and development strategy with a long-term vision. We need a successful model on productive transformation. The World Bank estimates that Latin America growth rate will be around 2.5% this year in 2025. For some people, this is good news, but we cannot be complacent. World Bank states that the region is in a state of robust mediocrity. And I think that they are right. 2.5 is not enough. So we have two possible paths and responses here. The first one is that what I say is that we tear our clothes, undertake the flight to the past in search of the guilty ones, and we lament eternally for a present that was not as we imagined. Or the second option here is that we look ahead, we assume the responsibility and challenge of contributing so the region can grow at higher and sustained rates. I am in the second group, in the group who believe that the region has an enormous opportunity for the future and must do its own homework. We have the challenge, as ECLAC, the Economic Commission for Latin America, points out, to move towards a major push of sustainability with the prospect for a new style of development and the implementation of the 2030 Agenda for sustainable development. So this is a virtuous combination of policies that can lead us to ideal scenario of grow to equalize and equalize to grow. So, and both ways are compatible. In this framework, we must ask ourselves the question, it is possible to introduce policies and institutional arrangements that promote quality employment, higher income levels, sustained and high growth rates, industrialization, and an adequate use of our competitive advantages? The international experience shows that it is possible. Beyond the ups and downs of the geopolitics and the global economy, the so-called East Asian miracle is a proof that it's possible. And this miracle continues to project its achievements over time. And what countries like South Korea, Hong Kong, Indonesia, Japan, Malaysia, Singapore, Taiwan, and so on did, they took advantage of the consolidation of global value chains and technological specialization. And they have achieved exceptional and sustained levels of growth backed by valuable macroeconomic stability, pragmatism, and long-term vision. And these three elements, economic stability, pragmatism, and long-term vision, some countries in the region are still fighting to get that. And the numbers are very illustrative. And let me give you here some numbers. In 2024, the income per capita of the US was around $87,000. Singapore achieved an income per capita of $104,000 in 2024. Let's go back to 1960. The scenario was completely different. The income per capita of the US was around $3,000, and Singapore was about $428. So it moved from 428 to over $100,000 in income per capita. So it is possible. And the success of East Asia, according to Joseph Stiglitz, was due to a combination of factors, such as high savings rate, coupled with significant levels of human capital accumulation, and in a framework of stability and market-driven policies. So what Stiglitz says that this is not a formula, but at least is a list of ingredients that makes possible this economic transformation. So it's imperative for the region, for Latin America, to emerge from the so-called middle income trap by reactivating its productivity growth, adding value to its raw material exports, and strengthening the regional integration. In other words, we need to update our productive transformation policies and also our integration policies. In words of Professor Gabriel Palma from Cambridge University, he says that what is required is not only the speed of a middle distance runner, but what is really needed is the endurance of a marathon runner. So we have to think, in 20, 30, 40, 50 years ahead. And our goal should be to achieve growth rates above 5% for several decades in a sustained manner, so we can build and construct this Latin American development pact based on high growth with efficiency, equity, and environmental sustainability. Some key elements that I think that the region must focus and is necessary to work around, and identify in the book 8 areas in which I believe is necessary to work. And let me mention very quickly. The first one is that we need to boost public and private investment. The second one is we need to train human capital in accordance to the needs of the 21st century. The third is we need to accelerate structural changes and environmental, technological, and digital transformation. The fourth one is we need to redouble the construction of physical and digital infrastructure. The fifth one is that we need to advance in reforms that contribute to job creation and social inclusion. The sixth one is that we need to strengthen competition in domestic markets to promote innovation, the creation and transfer of technology. The seventh one is that we need to provide greater access for financing, especially in the business sector. And the last one is we need a renewed push for regional and global trade integration. And definitely this requires an active participation of the private sector, as well as the state. And we need the states as a coordinated aim and strengthening institutional mechanisms to correct market failures and improving the provision of public goods and services. So the emphasis should be placed on key areas due to their potential in the region, such as energy transition, electromobility, circular economy, health, manufacturing industry, digital transformation, care economy, sustainable tourism, medium and small enterprises, and social and solidarity economy. Those areas have been carefully studied by ECLAC, and there are several reports of them indicating which are the champions, to say in a certain way, in which Latin America must specialize. And within this framework, also is needed a new generation of industrial policies. Its success depends on talent and also on rules of the game, stable rules of the game, to know the risk and that decisions that are taken shouldn't repeat past mistakes. So we need to have a common agreement to promote development actions and to prevent that those actions, those policies, being subject to the swings of the political and ideological pendulum in the region. This reflection on the development and growth strategy must be accompanied by a central element, the deepening of regional integration and greater productivity linkages. In the middle of this, I call it the globalization process that we are seeing at this moment around the world, we underline that it is time for more regional integration. And we have to understand the regional integration not as an option, but as a political imperative. It is strategic and it's an aspiration that has the potential to have a positive impact on practically all dimensions of regional development. And with this, I conclude. Dear panelists, my final message to you is to look to the future with pragmatism, with a long-term vision, and to build broad consensus around the required policies to enhance productivity and integration. The key for our development is in our hands, in the hands of the Latin Americans, and only in the hands of Latin Americans. At the same time, we need to have a renewed leadership in Latin America. So with this, I conclude this first part, and then we move to the second part. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Andrés, for sharing with us a very in-depth account of the book. It was very interesting to understand what were the motivations behind it. And I completely agree that we can always choose to stick to the past, or we can choose to look to the future. And this book is a bold message that the optimism lies in the future. So thank you for that. And I hope that this presentation gives you all an opportunity and a stimulus to read the book afterwards, because it's an unprecedented effort, I would say, to combine visions from leaders of many Latin American countries, high-level stakeholders, so it was very interesting to hear. And
Can I say something around
Sure,
this?
go ahead.
And something interesting is that you have in the book these leaders that in a current basis, for them it's very difficult to speak each other because they are too busy or because also they have political differences. And one of the virtues of the book is that we were able to put them together and to speak together in the book with high respect and consideration among others. And they were very frank in their comments. So one of the things I told them, don't be diplomat here. Tell us the right things, and we need to build the region in the long term.
Of course, and even among differences, we can find some common grounds, I'm sure. So that was an interesting exercise as well. And I think everyone should read the book to also find those commonalities moving forward. And I really like the idea that you mentioned that we are currently living the geopolitics of uncertainty. Yeah. And I think it's a very interesting concept for us to develop a little bit our thoughts here. Because when we are facing uncertainty, usually, if we go to our historical experiences, countries tend to look at their region as a safe space, you know? And when other countries are doing that successfully, especially in Asia, you mentioned some good examples of how regional integration boosted their economies and their political aspects as well. Here in Latin America, we have fragile institutions in the political level, I would say. We have very good institutions like CAF, for instance, doing the economic part quite well. But in the political level, we had CELAC, which was Brazil was not part of CELAC for the last 4 years. Now we are back, but still struggling to find common views, especially around Venezuela, for instance. Brazil tried to relaunch UNASUR, and it wasn't successful as well. We are still tiptoeing on that and trying to see where UNASUR is leading us. So you mentioned that the relevance of the region is currently followed by a question mark. And I would like to go from that comment and pass the floor to Thalita to ask her opinion on that as well. Thalita, my first question to you, and feel free to share your thoughts as informally as you want. What is the importance of regional integration for Latin America? And thinking about the importance of regional integration, what do you see are our strong points and our weak points moving forward in that direction?
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm very happy to be here. I want to thank the Brazilian Center for International Relations for the invitation. I am moving back to Brazil after spending a few years in Chile. I was working at a university there, and it's really nice to participate in an event like this in my first weeks in Brazil. I have to say that I'm also a very optimistic person, so I think we are sharing a few things here, and I truly believe in the importance of dialogue and debate in addressing Latin American challenges, and this is what this event and this book are about. Andres, first, I have to say that I really enjoyed reading your book. I have to say that I didn't read the whole book because it has almost 1,000 pages, but I could read some pieces, and it's really interesting to see how you could intertwine the interviews with the academic pieces. And I was also thinking, if you can tell us later, how you could do it only in 1 year. So it was really impressive because I believe that it was a lot of work that you had to do in this and this.
I didn't sleep that much. I didn't sleep too much.
Okay, and you didn't travel too much as well, I guess, because you really had to work really hard on it. So, in response to the question posed by Mariana, I would like to start with a premise. Like Latin America is not possible as a project without regional cooperation and integration. Only with integration and cooperation among our countries can we be competitive and relevant in the international scenario. It's imperative, I would say. But it's a very complex scenario, as your book shows in a brilliant way. It's thinking not only about Latin America, but thinking about the world in general. I think it's important to understand that it's not Latin America that's fragile today, right? The world is fragile today in some way. We are going through a lot of changes in the global order, and especially in the international liberal order. We may be seeing the end of the international liberal order as we knew. And of course, we in Latin America are not in the best position to see this end, if you understand what I mean. As a Brazilian, for example, I'm thinking that the last decade was not easy on us and was not easy for our region. If you think about the BRICS, for example, the importance that Brazil has at the global level compared to Russia, India, or China nowadays, is much less than it was in the past. This only to mention Brazil, not to mention other countries. But I believe that there are two things we could do to insert our region in the global scenario. Mariana, please tell me if I have to finish what I'm saying, okay? Because I took some notes. And I want to highlight the Celso Amorim interview in the book. I believe that we need to go beyond our political divergences and see regional integration and cooperation as a project that transcends ideological cycles. And by this, I don't mean a non-ideological project, because foreign policy, as a public policy, will always have a programmatic and ideological nature. What I mean is safeguarding the democratic component of this project, where even with divergent political perspectives, we can sit down and find a common ground to move the region forward together. I'm thinking about the dismantling of UNASUR, for example. It was emblematic of how short-sighted political shifts can harm long-term regional strategies during the short turn to the right that we had in Latin America. And I believe that this sort of strategy and of tactic must not happen again. Also because given the pandemic experience, for example, this demonstrated the high cost of fragmented regional responses. So just to finish, and related to what I said before, I think, and you said it in a brilliant way, and it's like written in the whole book, I think we need a long-term project, and I think we can agree about it in general, right? And what I believe is that we would argue for strengthening the organizations we already have, improving them, and working with a long-term perspective to build competitiveness. I don't know if it's possible with some presidents like the president of Argentina in charge nowadays, but I believe that we have to try to rebuild or to build robust institutions that can withstand ideological shifts and adapt to changing global context. And this is essential for our survival and relevance as a region. And also that I believe that without such efforts, we risk becoming even more marginalized in a world where regional blocs and coordinated actions are constantly shaping global power dynamics. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Thalita, for sharing your thoughts and also the optimism with us. And now I would like to invite Giampiero to the conversation. We are very honored to have you here with us today. And I would like to do that by going back to some of the topics that Andrés mentioned during his presentation. When, by the end of the presentation, he was mentioning what could be done to boost Latin American integration. He mentioned, for instance, boost public and private capital, develop human capital, and also infrastructure investments. And in those three aspects, among others, I think CAF is a relevant stakeholder to that. So I'd like, Gianpiero, to invite you to the conversation by asking you, how can Latin American countries diversify their economies and reduce reliance on commodities in order to be a more integrated and developed region?
Good afternoon, and thank you very much to CEBRI for the invitation. It's a pleasure to partner with you. Thank you very much to Andrés. Well, I would like to begin by commending his huge effort, marvelous book. I must tell you that we go a long way back, Andrés and myself. We have worked together for more than 10 years in several time periods, and he has always been my boss. So a lot of what I've learned comes from him. And I also, well, was a close witness, although he was in Oxford, I was in Caracas, of the effort, because we had long conversations, late night conversations on how he was processing the whole process of building this work and structuring it. And I truly believe that it is an important reference for all of us who study and work on public policy in the region, a collection of thoughts and testimonies from leaders that has not been done before, I'm convinced. And as Talita was mentioning, in this very, very challenging time for the region and the world, it is also a great defense of liberal democracy and multilateralism, I think, as a whole. Getting to your question, I would like to start by saying that as we are in an optimistic mood in this afternoon, you mentioned that CAF is an example of success in regional integration. And yes, we have to reflect on that and how can we build on that. This institution was created in 1968 between 5 Andean countries and started the first year with $1 million in capital. By 1990, its portfolio was around $1 billion in capital. And nowadays, we have a portfolio of $34 billion and assets around 57 billion. And we cover 22 countries in Latin America and the Caribbean, probably 26 by the end of the year. And we are an important actor to finance development and regional integration. So indeed, we are trying to leverage public and private capital to innovate in financial instruments and especially to promote regional integration in a very pragmatic way. Like we are focusing on trade facilitation, on border integration through technical assistance projects. We are massively investing in infrastructure, in both roads and energy, but also in logistics and digital integration. And we are trying also to be a forum for dialogue. This institution is also an example of different political ideologies that can cohabitate in a constructive way. So we believe that this potential of Latin America, as we're saying, a region of solutions, is truly important, is truly significant, and probably the difficult context that we're facing now will be or should be the most important driver for us to realize that this is a big opportunity for regional integration, and CAF will be there to provide the support, the financing to make this possible for our countries. I'll leave it there for now.
Thank you for this first round of sharing your thoughts with us today. And I see that Professor Lourdes Casanova has already joined us. So I will also invite her to the conversation, and then we do a second round of questions, if that's okay. So Professor, thank you for joining us. It's a pleasure to have you here. I would like to ask you a more broader question about the geopolitical scenario that we are facing now. And how do you see that Latin America can play a role in this US-China polarized scenarios? And what would be your advice for the Latin American countries to make their institutions stronger, to also deal internally with the challenges of this new geopolitical turmoil that we are facing? Thank you again for joining us today.
Thank you very much for the invitation. In my previous life at INSEAD, I would go to Brazil maybe 2-3 times a year, because I was in charge of programs that we were doing with the Brazilian Confederation of Industries. And also we had this great partner that was Fundação Cabral, so I would go all the time. And since I joined Cornell in 2012, and I am the director of the Emerging Markets Institute now for 11 years, you know, in emerging markets now, China and India occupy all the space you can give them, because they are, and Latin America has lost a little bit, as you all have said, and that's why Andres' book is key. I was so enthusiastic. I spent some time in Oxford, and I had the privilege to meet him, to discuss with him. And the efforts he has made has been tremendous, an effort that he has financed himself. He has put all the resources, personal, intellectual, in doing it, and has been an heroic and very important. Now, even now, we realize even more important than when he started the project, given the geopolitical situation that we are in. So I was earlier today speaking in a conference organized by Brand Finance in London, and I was exactly in this with Parag Khanna and John Ferguson from The Economist, and we discussed that. And I said a couple of things. One, during the conference, I could see, and other events that I have participated, that there is some nostalgia of the past time. And some people believe, you know what, this is going to be a parenthesis, and then we are going to go back to previous time, and that's it. And my belief is that this is a change of paradigm. It's a change of paradigm that is because the rise of China has been a bonanza for emerging markets, and and definitely a challenge as well, because they compete so hard in absolutely every single industry. BYD is opening a manufacturing facility in the northeast of Brazil. A State Grid Corporation of China bought CPFL, a privatized electricity company, is bought by 100% state-owned world-class electricity company from China. So we see these paradoxes and these tremendous challenges every single day. In Brazil, I would say, maybe more than other countries, because Brazil has been a country open to everybody, US, Europe, if you look at the trade, the investments, in China, of course. So then Brazil is at the heart. Also, Brazil is a very important member of the BRICS. Brazil, in a previous life, wanted to be the leader of emerging markets. Let's don't forget that Celso Amorim, whom you interviewed, was the organizer of the G20 group of the in the World Trade Organization. I remember him saying, you know what the emerging markets would do? We would sit in one room and wait for Europe and US to decide, and then they would come and they would inform us. So he changed that. So let's not forget Brazil, tremendous leadership. And again, Celso Amorim has been a tremendous diplomat who has been an actor of these changes. So Brazil is in the middle of all this. So what is the future of Brazil? And I'm going to go back to one book that I published in 2014 in the middle of the impeachment of Dilma Rousseff. I was, and at the same time as this guy, this journalist from The Economist, what is the famous journalist from The Economist? Well, the name will come later on. Both wrote the book at the same time. He was very pessimistic. I was very optimistic. I wanted to be optimistic. 2014, his book sold a lot, mine not that much because I was optimistic. And because this was this turmoil, in another way, but similar to the current one, although more Brazilian than global, at some point I said, let's stop and let's interview, with the help of Barbara Marchiori de Assis, a student from Brazil. I told her, we are going to do one thing. We are going to interview 100 leaders of Brazil to find out what Brazil thinks. So guess what? The Brazilian elite, the Brazilian leadership, we looked at academia, but also business, politicians, NGOs, think tanks, 100 people. And there was consensus on the type of how the economy should work, open economy, export-oriented. But then when we asked the question, what is Brazil's role in the world? No consensus. So I think, and I'm going to finish with that, I think, and that was mentioned by the previous speakers, Latin America needs to get together. Not Mercosur has to work. South America has to get together. Why? Because big is back, big and powerful is back. And Brazil, as powerful as it is not in comparison with the rest. So, and because, and again, that was a discussion on my previous panel, we are going to regionalization. Africa has signed and launched during COVID the African Trade Agreement. Asia doesn't need trade agreements because they have such huge economies, but still, they launched the RCEP. All countries, including Japan, signed, with the exception of India, because India is quite a closed economy. But then they said, we leave the door open. The day that you say to enter, we'll do fast track. North America has, or had, as you know, this now under supervision, USMCA. And yes, Brazil has Mercosur, but no Mercosur. But so Brazil needs to, and again, I go back to that 2014 when there was no agreement. Brazil needs to assume a leadership in Latin America and needs to be the leader to put South America together, because if not Brazil, who? So Brazil is a big economy, solid economy, with still manufacturing powers. For whatever reason, I was against Boeing buying Embraer, and thank God didn't happen, because look at now Boeing, what would have happened with Embraer. So because of Embraer, because of other companies, you have a very robust medium-sized manufacturing companies, family business. You still have this, and then Brazil should, my opinion, lead, and then for that we need, of course, leadership. And guess what? There is lack of leadership, or not as strong leadership, in many South American countries. But okay, as they say in Spanish, mal de muchos, consuelo de. So really, unfortunately, but we have the new generation, those of you sitting there in the room, this new generation has to look for leadership, and the leadership has to find a solution, because South America has to unite. Otherwise, you depend on what someone outside says, and you need to look, we are in times to look at the solutions within, and again, only one country, even Brazil, is not enough. You need a regional integration, as the other regions of the world have integrated to increase trade, because during the regional integration, the trade will be much more fluid, much more consistent, much more reliable. And of course, you expand your own market. And it's not only trade, it's investment, and it's, of course, solidification of institutions. We haven't talked about AI, and AI is always, so AI cannot be developed for one country, has to develop for a group of countries. Last year, we organized a case competition, and last year's case competition was, should Brazil have a chips, a semiconductors industry? This is a question for all emerging markets. I was in Vietnam later on, and Vietnam was asking the same question. India is asking the same questions. So should SEITEC be revived or not? So, and then these questions, the answer is regional, not only one country. The answer is regional because the investments are huge. Sorry, I am a little bit.
Oh, can I say something?
Sure, I'll pass the floor. Yes. Thank you for these very energizing comments and also keeping the optimism high in the room. It was great. And I will pass the floor back to you, Andres. Go.
No, and let me thank you, Gianpiero, and also Lourdes for their participation. I know that you made a big effort to be present here, and I do appreciate that. And one comment, and to highlight the work of CAF, the Development Bank of Latin America and the Caribbean, in the current time. So CAF is lending around $14.5 billion US currently to the region. So that's a big amount, but the contributions of CAF goes beyond that. And that's something that was Gianpiero saying, that it's not only on the financing side, it's also on the technical side, providing knowledge and generating spaces of dialogue and integration of the region. And that's the role of a multilateral development bank. And I think that that's something to highlight, and to highlight also the participation of Brazil in CAF. And I think that in the coming years, what we should look for is a further participation of countries, further capitalization of CAF, and in order to enhance this Latin American space. And now I move to what Lourdes was saying about leadership. I think the core of the issues here is leadership. Leadership among countries and also within countries. And we need in this time, and also with and I agree with you that the liberal order is now under question. And I think we are starting a new time after the new liberal order. We need this kind of leaderships in order to create the consensus. And here, Brazil, I think Brazil, CEBRI, has an important role to play. We need to strengthen the South American space in this case. And it should be a space in which we have further trade, further investments, further dialogue, but a dialogue based on a very pragmatic way in the things that really change the life of people. And that's what we need to find, which are the topics in which can have a common dialogue without having fights in the region. Fights, forget about fights, we need to work. And that's the challenge here. And otherwise, if we don't work together, if the region is not united, it's going to happen what President Lagos and also former Minister Castañeda of Mexico have been saying about the irrelevance of the region. Latin America, South America cannot be irrelevant. And we have everything to be relevant. So let's work for that. Now you have the word.
I will pass the floor back to you, actually, because I have a question to you. But I was very interested in all presentations, this idea that regional integration must be a premise was very present and very highlighted. So it shows that it requires a lot of leadership, but also political will, right? We have to make our leaders accountable of the fact that it's on their hands to make that integration happen. It's not automatic. It demands a lot of work, a lot of effort, but once we put things on track, we have some good examples of the past. When the region worked together, we managed to accomplish a lot of things in South America especially, but in Latin America as well. But before doing a second round of comments, I was wanting from the beginning to ask you if you could tell us some gossip about the process of writing the book. If you had, for example, a very interesting conversation with a president that shared with you something that you were not expecting, or if there was a chapter that was particularly interesting in your point of view, because I think with some of gossip, people will be even more interested in reading that specific part of the book.
Well, no, there are a lot of stories around the book, and I would say the first one is that some people thought that was crazy, and even my colleagues at the London School of Economics, the two directors of the Global South unit, they were talking about themselves and saying, Andres, how is going to, in 1 year to do this? Well, we did it. And we did it because I think there was the commitment of the 106 people that participated in this project, and even more than that. Many people participated in this, and they truly believe in this project. And they truly believe, and they make it. And when you look at the interviews, all the interviews were done at the proper time. They revised the text, they approved the text. Even the experts or the authorities who I requested to write these short articles, they did it on time. And Lourdes gave me in Oxford, and I think a very good advice, and said, Andres, imagine that you are driving a bus. So you keep moving, you request the papers, the articles, but you cannot stop the car until you finish. And I did that. So I didn't stop the car. And fortunately, everybody submitted their papers on time. And for me, it has been one of the most fascinating experiences in my life to do this book. And I said it was a public good. It was a contribution to the region. And everything started, and I wrote in the book, there are two moments in my life that motivated me to do this. One is the idea to go to Oxford. After I finished my master's degree at LSE, I said, next time that I go back to the academia, I will go to Oxford. And then during my time at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, a chief of cabinet of the minister and so on, and also at CAF as Secretary General, as chief of cabinet of the president and so on. I said, and we have many meetings with authorities around the world. I said, one time I will, after all these people that I have met, I need to write a book interviewing all the people that I have met. So I put together the two things. And then I said, we have to have here a deadline. And the deadline is before I turn 50, I have to accomplish this as a personal goal. So I said the time, the date, and I quit everything, my job, everything, to do this and to be full year just writing and with my family.
It's amazing. Thank you for sharing the personal aspect of the book as well. We as academics, we know how it is hard to put together a big project like that. And also how lucky you were that everyone submitted the paper on time. That's usually not the reality. And I am sure that a lot of it has to do with the confidence that you and your team passed to the participants. So I congratulate you on that.
Let me tell you an anecdote that is interesting.
Go ahead. Yes, I was looking forward to that.
I was thinking about the issue of democracy and to have someone from Venezuela in the interview. So I said, well, let's think about who could be the best person to have the interview, and say, okay, let's do it with Moisés Naim. So one Saturday, I wrote Moisés Naim 8 o'clock in the morning. I said, Moisés, I'm doing this project. I want you to be part. I want to interview you. And he just read the WhatsApp and didn't reply. Say, no. It cannot be possible. So I then, a few minutes later, I sent him another chat and saying, Moisés, and these people is participated in the Brook project. So I sent the whole list. Right? 1 minute later, he called me back. Andres, I am in. I said, well, when do you want to do the interview? Right now. 8 o'clock in the morning, Saturday, no? So I said, okay, please give me 15 minutes to organize everything by Zoom, and saying, well, the 15 minutes were to take a shower and to think about all the questions for the interview. Obviously, before doing any interview, I have a set of questions, more than 150 questions in total. So we were not exactly what to ask. I have read all the books of Moisés Naim, and we did the interview to Moisés Naim. And the interview was planned for 30 minutes. And with the journalist, what I realized at that moment is the interview with the journalist was very different to interviews to a head of state, to a minister. They took their time and so on. Moisés Naim was like in a ping pong, no? It was very fast. So in 15 minutes, all my questions were answered. Say, no, we need more. So we started a very good conversation until we finished the half an hour. And it was a fascinating experience. And after that conversation, I said, we need to include in each of the chapters one journalist. So I started calling the further journalists. So we invited Andrés Oppenheimer, Angela Patricia Janiot, Gaby Frias, Michael Reed from The Economist, and Michael Stott from the Financial Times. And that's the story about the journalist in the book.
And that's also a symbol of how those people, they wanted to talk about this topic so much that they just needed the opportunity and the platform, and the book provided it to them. So that's also very interesting. And we still have time for a second round for final remarks. I don't know if Professor Casanova is still with us, but I will do the other way around and then call Giampiero first. And if she joins us, I'll call her again, and Thalita to end, if that's okay. Giampiero, in the book, some of the parts of the book talks about some of the issues that you mentioned as well about CAF's work, and also that Andrés mentioned as important for the region. For example, energy transition, sustainability, nearshoring, power shoring, and so on. And in your final remarks, could you say a little bit, how do you see those type of topics being one of the axes for regional integration as well? And I thank you again for your participation.
Thank you very much. Yes, I would like to start by pointing out that, as Andrés mentioned, our work in each country has a special focus on based on the dialogue we have with the government. And in Brazil, we opened our office in 2008, if I'm not wrong. And we have a very important work that is being done, but focused on regional governments and municipalities. So we are hearing very often that CAF is called the Bank of Municipalities of Brazil. And we are really focusing on territorial development, on urban transport, local opportunities for economic development, tourism, institutional strengthening. And in that way, I think dozens of local governments in Brazil have been benefiting from, and regional governments have been benefiting from our partnership. And in this way, starting from zero, now Brazil is representing around 10% of our portfolio. So we trust that we will go even further. And we are, for example, focusing from the Southern Cone on regional integration projects in energy, in hidrovías. This is canals and this kind of connections for trading in goods. Of course, all the road infrastructure that has been built, the interoceanic roads that connect Brazil with Bolivia, Peru, were financed by CAF. And we believe that now the focus of investment in regional integration has to be in the new areas where Latin America presents important comparative advantages at a global level. And we are deeply involved with strategic ecosystems that also need regional integration to allow ecosystems to function. We are focusing on biodiversity preservation, projects also that transcend frontiers, developing green energies, of course, and we are trying also to start working on different areas where we haven't intervened before, such as mining, and especially the question of rare minerals that will drive the technological revolution is a new field where we are looking at and trying to devise solutions for our member countries. And well, I would like to end by saying that this year will be crucial to redefine our role in the world and how do we picture it. We are having, this is a rare coincidence, right? We're having an EU CELAC summit this year in Colombia. We are having a summit of the Americas at the end of the year in the Dominican Republic. And we're having a China CELAC meeting in Beijing, also in May. So the three main actors with which we interact are looking at us. That's for a reason also. And we have a huge challenge to be up to the task and to play in every scenario in the most skillful way to make the most of it and to unite, because this will be the opportunity where we can act with pragmatism and find a new way to interact with the world. So I will end with that. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you. And it's very important that you highlighted that the world is paying attention to Latin America somehow. And we need to stick with that good message as well. I don't know if Professor Lourdes Casanova is connected or no? Okay, she should be back any moment. So I will pass the floor to Thalita for your final remarks, and also open the floor to you if you want to share something about your experience in Chile, how Chile sees regional integration, how Latin America is from the Chilean point of view. That would be very interesting as well.
Okay, thank you, Mariana, and thank you, Andres, for sharing your experience. During my PhD, I did almost 60 interviews with political elites in Brazil, Chile, and Uruguay, and it was really nice, and I have very good stories about it. But it's for another time, for another meeting. I would stick with one question that Mariana sent to us to think about the limits and potential of our region related to address our multiple crises, right? I would say that we are not going through an institutional or economic crisis only, but we are going through multiple crises, and it will depend the context that we are talking about, the country that we are talking about. So I'm a political scientist and I'm a comparativist, and I do comparative politics, so I will share some thoughts related to comparative politics. And normally, nowadays, I like to say that we are living in an era of low presidential rates, approval rates, right? Not only in Latin America, but around the world. And this reflects this broader reality, since we are talking about high levels of public disaffection with politics and dissatisfaction with how democracy is functioning. If we think about Latin America, we are talking about the punishment vote, right? It has become a defining feature of this era at the global level. And this is an important limit to our leaderships, right? It's important to recognize it, to think about what we can do, even in a context where our presidents, our leader, will not have anymore 87% of approval rate, for example, as Lula had in his second term in Brazil, or as Bachelet had in her first term in Chile. These scenarios are no longer likely to happen. The only exception, I would say, is Bukele in El Salvador, but it's another story and it's very complex. And why is this important? Because these declining approval rates are not just about statistics. They are symptoms, right? And they also teach us an important lesson that approval rates alone will not be enough to solve this crisis. And even if we do not count with these high levels of approval rates that Brazil had with Lula in the best time of Brazil, we need to develop a strategy to navigate in these complex and interconnected challenges that we face as a region and as a world. Talking about potentials, I think that we can always talk about limits, right? Because we are from Latin America, and this is the history of Latin America in the end. But we must also recognize our potential. And I also believe that we have gone through a learning process in the last decades. And it's very important to highlight this learning process that we had with Mercosur, that we had with CELAC, with UNASUR, and all the experience that you are sharing about CAF as well. Why is this important? Because we know what worked and what didn't. And this cumulative knowledge is an asset. And I want to highlight two key points here, and I want to talk about Fernanda Torres. Because Latin America is not isolated. And Fernanda Torres, do you know Fernanda Torres? No, okay. Fernanda Torres is this brilliant Brazilian actress, and she's nominated for the Oscar as Best Actress for her role in this movie called I Am Still Here, okay? And in one of the many interviews that Fernanda Torres gave in the last months, she made a very important point that I think it's important to reflect about our region. The movie is about the dictatorship, the Brazilian dictatorship. So she was saying that the Latin America dictatorships and the Brazilian dictatorship didn't arise because we were banana republics, okay? We all know it, but the world sometimes don't recognize it. Instead, these dictatorships were deeply tied to the geopolitics of the Cold War. Right? So Latin America was strategic for the Cold War during this time. And this is a reminder that our region has always been and remains important and relevant in the global dynamics, even if the result is as terrible as a dictatorship. And I want to take this interview of Fernanda Torres to say that to move forward, we cannot think about Latin America in isolation. We have to think in Latin America as a part of a complex puzzle. And I want to finish thinking about 2 points that I believe are important to address our challenges and our multiple crises: accountability and compromise. And what I want to say here is that we need to recognize the role of international political elites in shaping our region's path. But we also have to think that addressing today's crisis will require us to forge compromises. And these compromises must bring together political and economic elites at both the national and regional levels to allow us to respond to these structural changes happening in the global order, in the regional order. And for this, we need compromise, but we also need accountability among us, but also among our population. You have something that you say in your whole book is that we want to think about Latin America as a project, but we are thinking about Latin America as a project because we want to improve the lives of our population, right? So in order to do it, we need to have strong compromises together, and we also have to be accountable to these people, to us in the end. Thank you.
Good.
Thank you, Thalita. And I will also mention Fernanda Torres again, because it's something that caught my attention. She did an interview this week when she said that when she says the word coração, it's a word that has sentiment, has emotion for her. And when she says the word heart, it's just a word that she learned. And we can extrapolate that and think about the region. If an outsider look to Latin America for them is just an outsider region. When we look at Latin America, coming from Latin America, as you did in your book, that's something that has meaning to us. It's our region, it's our land, it's our territory. So it's very interesting to see how Latin American leaders see the region instead of departing from a starting point that comes from an European or someone from the US or even from Asia. So I think the book is very interesting for that as well. And I will Professor Lourdes is back here with us, so I will pass the floor to you, Lourdes, for your very short final remarks, if I may, and then back to Andres, and then we can wrap up the session.
I will finish with the movie. I'm still here with a comment on that.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And also, if you could share some instructions of how people can find the book, to read the book, that would be wonderful as well.
Yeah.
So, Professor Lourdes Casanova, you have the floor.
So, two things. One, my contribution to the book was about central bank digital currencies. One obsession for me in Latin America has been currencies. I think currencies have caused disproportionate damage to the economies of the region. One case in point is Argentina. It's not that Argentinians do borrow too much money, it's that the currency keeps going down. Another case in point is Brazil. Is the Brazilian real 6 to the dollar? I think it's definitely not. I think you have to find a middle point, and these variations in currency. I've seen the Brazilian real at 1.4, now at 6. So currencies have to be solved. That's one thing. And then another thing, integration and definitely leadership. For me, these 3 points: the currencies, the integration, and the leadership. And we have here in the room three tremendous leaders. It will be for you to push the region to another level, to the level that the region deserves, because as you have said before, it's a very important region for the world. They export, very few countries can export as much agricultural products, major minerals, oil, etc. So the world needs Latin America, and Latin America needs the world.
Good. Okay, let me make a final comment here. And I think we have been talking about economics, regional integration, but institutions. But let me focus now, and I want to conclude with this, because we cannot leave the room without talking about democracy. And I have a big concern about the democracy in Latin America at the present time. And I think, and this is why I bring the movie, the Brazilian movie, I Am Still Here. And also I will link that with another excellent movie, the Argentinian one, The Night of the Pencils, La Noche de los Lápices, which I believe is, for all the students, should watch that movie. And there is a parallel between both movies. Both happens during the dictatorships time. When you watch the movie, and even I watched it last Sunday, I say I'm going to watch before going to Brazil. And what you see in the movie is a pattern that you see currently in some countries in the region. All the repression, the freedom of press is cut, violation of human rights, and so on. And that's something that cannot happen in the region. Some people think, and I say in the book, that we are moving towards a democratic disenchantment, or we are moving from indifference to disaffection to democratic values. When you look at the Latinobarometer numbers, the figures, it shows that only 33% of Latin Americans are satisfied with the results of the democratic regimes. So only 1/3 of the population is satisfied with democracy. And only 52% of the people support democracy. For me, that's scary. That's something that we have to be aware of, that trend that is not only happening in the region, it's a phenomenon at the global scenario, that the democracy is losing ground around the world. So that is the diagnostics, but we have to look again forward and to see how we can strengthen democracy in the region. And I think it's very important, and I will mention quickly 5 points here, is that we need to build and construct an integral view of democracy that goes beyond elections. Democracy is not elections. The second point here is that we need to have more good governance. So we need to strengthen the capacity of governments, the institutions, to provide solutions to the people. The third one is we need to undertake reform of the political and electoral systems to strengthen parties, Congress, and electoral bodies. The fourth one is that the joint regional and even hemispheric action is a cross-cutting element, and the inter-American system must play a fundamental role. And we have to look at the election now, the new Secretary General of the EAS. That's very important because that will set the tone of the fight against autocracies in the region. And the fifth one is that definitely we need to update the Inter-American Democratic Charter in order to provide more tools to fight and to defend, to fight autocracies and to defend democracy. At the end of the day, and with this I conclude, there is the commitment that we have with the rule of law, the respect of international law, the respect of institutions. We, as a collective, as society, from academia, from governments, from the private sectors, that's a common joint effort that we have to have at this moment. And at the end of the day, democracy is at the core of everything here in our societies. So with this call to defend democracy, I would like to end the session.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts. I will just ask Professor Luis Casanova and Gianpiero to stay connected for a few minutes so we can take a family photo after the panel. And if you could please share with us how people can access the book.
Yeah, the access could be accessed. The easiest way is that at CEBRI's library, there are one copy of the book, so you can have access directly from the library. Also, you can download the book from Amazon in a ebook. And if you want to have a hard copy, there is a website called buscalibre.com. They deliver books all over the region. I would say it's a multi-Latina, okay? So they deliver books around all the region, and you can have it there. Or you can call me, and I would be very pleased to send you a copy. Yeah.
Thank you, everyone. See you next, and please subscribe to CEBRI's newsletter to stay tuned to our next events. Thank you.